Welcome back to A Century of Cinema. Been a while. Today I will be exploring my favourite films of 1980. First up, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, based kind of on a Stephen King novel. Since countless hours of video and reams of writing are devoted to this film, I won't go into too much detail. But basically, Jack Nicholson stars as Jack Torrance, who is hired as the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel for the winter. He takes his wife Wendy, Shelley Duvall, and son Danny Lloyd. Danny has a psychic ability which Overlook chef Dick Halloran, played by Scatman Crothers, who shares that ability, refers to as shining. The hotel soon makes Jack crazy to a murderous degree, and all sorts of horrific shit goes down. The film retains the basic premise and characters of King's novel, but changes almost everything else. But while not being a particularly faithful adaptation, it does succeed in being an all-round excellent film. My favourite Kubrick, in fact. Almost all of the brilliance derives from the atmosphere created by Kubrick's cold yet laser-focused direction. Roy Walker's immaculate and sometimes eerily ordinary production design, and enhanced by the extraordinary work of cinematographer John Alcott, perhaps Kubrick's most valuable collaborator. And on top of all that, we have Jack Nicholson pulling out all the stops, from just a bit odd, to subtly menacing, and all the way to insanely homicidal. This film is terrifying at times, but not necessarily in a conventional way. The most frightening moments come from the unsettling nature of the images presented. Certain scenes stay with you long after viewing. And The Shining has become so ingrained into collective cinematic memory that many elements are now simply part of Western culture. That's why I don't feel the need to talk about it too much. It is one of the greatest ever horror films, and for my money, the scariest of 1980. Airplane, from the team of Jim Abrams, David Zucker, and Jerry Zucker, is an hilarious comedy starring Robert Hayes as Ted Stryker, an ex-fighter pilot, who is traumatized by his tragic past. He boards a flight to try and win back his girlfriend Elaine, Julie Haggerty. When many of the passengers and all of the flight crew come down with food poisoning, Dr. Rumack, Leslie Nielsen, in the role that would revitalize his career, this time as a comic actor, enlists Ted to fly the plane. This entire plot, as well as a lot of the dialogue and the main character's name, is lifted directly from the 1957 film 0 Hour. It is so blatant that if you watch 0 Hour after watching Airplane, you will most likely burst into laughter at regular intervals, remembering the same scenes in Airplane. In fact, I highly recommend doing just that. Airplane, or Flying High as I first knew it, is quite simply one of the funniest movies ever made. Aside from being a direct parody of 0 Hour, it also satirizes the airport film series. It is wall-to-wall gags start to finish, with the vast majority of them actually hitting the mark, from the visual gags to the great lines, some of which are now iconic.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
And the selection of generally serious actors at the time, such as Nielsen, Peter Graves, Lloyd Bridges, and Robert Stack, is a stroke of genius, since such care is taken to play it completely straight, with immaculate attention to detail. This can be seen not only on the plane and tower, but in the flashbacks about Ted and Elaine's relationship, with my favourite scene being the night they met in a dive bar, which somehow turns into a brilliant spoof of Saturday Night Fever. Airplane is regularly lauded as one of the greatest comedies of all time, but there is one element that I feel is underappreciated: Robert Hayes' performance as Ted Stryker. I think it may be so good that you don't immediately notice, but after a few rewatches, I started marveling at just how good Hayes is in this role. He plays it 100% straight and exhibits top-notch comic timing. Airplane is a broad, silly spoof which outright stole its premise, lead character, and dialogue, yet it is somehow the funniest movie of 1980, and up there with the greatest ever comedy films. Somewhere in Time, written by Richard Matheson, based on his novel Bid Time Return, stars Christopher Reeve as playwright Richard Collier. He is approached one day by an old woman who hands him a watch and strangely asks him to come back to her. 8 years later, during a bout of writer's block, Richard winds up at the Grand Hotel, where he finds and is drawn to a photograph of Elise McKenna, Jane Seymour. Upon further investigation, he finds out that she and the old woman are one and the same. He then seeks out his old college professor who wrote a book on time travel, the key to which he believes is self-hypnosis. After several attempts, Richard is finally successful after the discovery of his name in a guest book from 1912 gives him the belief required to make the journey. When he arrives, he seeks out Elise, and there is an instant magical connection between them. But they are hindered by her controlling manager William, played by Christopher Plummer, who seems to have anticipated Richard's arrival. To go further into the plot would be a disservice to anyone who has not seen it, since the story unfolds beautifully and somewhat unexpectedly. But suffice it to say, it is filled with incredible warmth, heart-wrenching tragedy, and extremely generous portions of tender and exquisite romance. This is, for me, easily director Jeannot Swark's best work. It is nothing fancy, yet it lovingly embraces Matheson's beautiful script and gets some excellent performances from the cast, particularly Christopher Reeve, who has never been better, which is particularly evident in the most heartbreaking moments of the film. Jane Seymour, at her absolute loveliest, also does a wonderful job as Elise, my favourite performance of hers, yet it is the combination and the chemistry which make it all work. I think the power of the story may have gotten to them for a while too, since Reeve and Seymour apparently had a brief relationship during the production. Somewhere in Time also looks and sounds incredible. John Barry's score perfectly encapsulates the romantic tone of the film, and Jean-Pierre Dorléac's Oscar-nominated costumes transport you not only to a time, but to an emotional place. However, for me, it is Richard Matheson's incredible script which stands out the most. The story is intricately woven and paced so well with no wasted time whatsoever. And that is on top of being one of the most beautiful romances ever written. I love this movie and could go on and on, but I will leave it with Richard Matheson's Somewhere in Time is my choice for Best Adapted Screenplay of 1980. Ordinary People. Robert Redford's directorial debut concerns the Jarrett family. Parents Calvin and Beth, Donald Sutherland and Mary Tyler Moore, and their teenage son Conrad, Timothy Hutton. After losing eldest son Buck in a boating accident, Conrad attempts suicide, and the film traces his attempt to cobble together some semblance of a life. Calvin tries his best to help, but Beth behaves very coldly toward Conrad. She tries to play the part of a loving mother, but the loss of Buck has wounded her to her core. Fortunately, Conrad is helped enormously by his therapist, Dr. Berger, Judd Hirsch in one of his best roles. This is a hands-down excellent film, and a luminous debut for Redford at the helm. The screenplay, by Alvin Sargent, based on Judith Guest's novel, is also top-notch. Brimming with warmth, subtlety, tragedy, and just enough humour to keep it free from being mired in melancholy. But it is the performances which shine the brightest here. Donald Sutherland does some of his best work as Calvin, trying to keep his family together while barely holding on himself. Sutherland nails every beat, and if it weren't for his co-star, he would be my best actor choice. That co-star? Timothy Hutton in his film debut. He won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, for some reason, but Conrad is clearly the main protagonist. And Hutton acts out of his skin in every scene. Visibly on edge practically all the time, which Hutton nails, and when he breaks, he's even better. One of the greatest film debut performances ever. Then we have Mary Tyler Moore, who has the thankless task of portraying the supremely unlikable Beth. Then famous for her bubbly TV persona, she takes a complete 180, and ooh boy does she knock it out of the park. It's not at all flashy, but it is brimming with restraint and nuance, and an apparent total habitation of the character. And the scenes with she and Hutton together are heartbreaking to watch. So, Timothy Hutton and Mary Tyler Moore are my choices for Best Actor and Best Actress.
Can I help?
Help what? Oh, you mean with this?
Yeah.
No.
I will.
No, I'll tell you what you can do, though. You can go upstairs to that room of yours and clean out the closet.
Mom?
Okay? Because it really is a mess.
Woody Allen's Stardust Memories stars Allen as filmmaker Sandy Bates, who attends a retrospective of his own films while going through an existential crisis. His mind is occupied with three women: a past relationship with the unstable Dory, played by Charlotte Rampling, his current girlfriend Isabel, Marie-Christine Barrault, and Jessica Harper's Daisy, whom Sandy meets at the retrospective and reminds him of Dory. Throughout, Sandy is set upon by rabid fans as he wrestles with the meaning of his work and life. This is quite possibly my favourite Woody Allen film. He does some of his best work in Stardust Memories as actor, director, and especially writer. While it is perhaps his best acting turn, and his direction, an homage to Federico Fellini, is incredibly stylish and affecting, it is his screenplay which stands out the most for me. Beautifully weaving humour, romance, and tragedy into this surrealist tapestry. The scenes with Dory are for me the most compelling, both for the script and the sublime performance of Charlotte Rampling. However, my favourite scene of all is the one where Sandy talks to some aliens. It is self-referential, gorgeous to look at, and funny as hell.
But shouldn't I stop making movies and do something that counts, like helping blind people or becoming a missionary or something?
Let me tell you, you're not the missionary type. You'd never last. And incidentally, you're also not Superman. You're a comedian. You want to do mankind a real service? Tell funnier jokes.
Frequent collaborator Gordon Willis's black and white cinematography is also top-notch. While perfectly capturing the Fellini mood, he also evokes a bit of Sven Nykvist's work with Bergman, as well as putting his own unique stamp on it. Not only does the film look great, it sounds fantastic too, with some Cole Porter arrangements by Dick Hyman, and of course Louis Armstrong's classic rendition of Stardust. And the cast do a great job all the way down the call sheet. Barreau and Harper give excellent support as the other women in Sandy's life. Tony Roberts makes a fun little cameo as himself. We get original SNL cast member Lorraine Newman as a studio exec, and Sharon Stone, on debut, makes a stunning Marilyn-esque impression as the girl on the train. Stardust Memories was always going to be in the running for my Best Picture of 1980, but as it stands, I can only award it Best Original Screenplay. Finally, The Blues Brothers, starring Dan Aykroyd as Elwood and John Belushi as Jake, directed by John Landis. When Jake is released from prison, his brother Elwood picks him up and takes him to the orphanage in which they grow up, where they learn from a nun known as the Penguin and the janitor Curtis, Cab Calloway, who essentially raised Jake and Elwood, that the orphanage will have to shut down if they can't get the money they need. So Jake and Elwood resolve to get the money somehow. They soon hit upon the idea of getting the old band back together. And what a band! Steve the Colonel Cropper, Donald Duck Dunn, Willie Two Big Hall, Mr. Fabulous Alan Rubin, Tom Bones Malone, Blue Lou Marini, and Matt Guitar Murphy. They perform one big show while evading scores of police led by John Candy, some angry cowboys, Illinois Nazis, and Jake's homicidal ex-girlfriend played by Carrie Fisher. Culminating in the most spectacular and entertaining car chase ever filmed. I hate car chases, but this one, actually two, I think I like the one in the mall even more, is a joy to behold. But above the action spectacle, it is also one of the greatest comedies and musicals ever made. On the comedy side, the script by Aykroyd and Landis is endlessly funny, with hilarious scene after hilarious scene. None better than when Jake and Elwood disrupt Mr. Fabulous's fancy restaurant.
How much for the little girl? The women. How much for the women?
What?
Your women. I want to buy your women, the little girl, your daughters. Sell them to me. Sell me your children.
And when it comes to the music, I think this has the greatest soundtrack of any movie ever. The Blues Brothers' performances alone would be enough. You have their brilliant and side-splitting attempt to please a country audience with Stand By Your Man and the theme from Rawhide.
Move 'em on. Hit 'em up. Hit 'em up. Move 'em on. Move 'em on. Hit 'em up. Rawhide. Cut 'em out. Ride 'em in. Ride 'em in. Cut 'em out. Cut 'em out. Ride 'em in Rawhide. Yeah!
As well as their final performance at the Palace Hotel Ballroom, one of the many highlights of the film. But on top of that, there are musical numbers from a slew of legendary performers. James Brown's Divine the Old Landmark, John Lee Hooker's Boom Boom, Ray Charles' Shake Your Tail Feather, Aretha Franklin's Think, and Cab Calloway performing his signature tune, Minnie the Moocher. Hell, even the background music is awesome. And tying this all together is director John Landis, who never misses a beat, even though he is making what is in equal parts an action movie, a comedy, and a musical. And he does it all with style and flair. I could go on about this movie for hours because I've loved it since I was a kid and watched it literally hundreds of times. But suffice it to say, The Blues Brothers is my choice for Best Director, John Landis, and Best Picture of 1980.
106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes, it's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
Join me next time on A Century of Cinema when I will be discussing my favourite films of 1981. Now, go watch a movie, and listen to some blues while you're at it.
6 and 3 is 9, 9 and 9 is 18. Look there, brother, baby,